about analytical approaches to assessing the need for regulatory submissions. Judith, please, the floor is yours.
Should I take this mic?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction, Professor Blankenbach, and thank you all for coming, even in the late afternoon. So my name is Judith Faut, and I'm going to present this work together with my co-author, who unfortunately is not here today, with Nick Niesbet, but I think he watches us live via stream. So as Professor Blankenbach said, so the topic is analytical approach to assessing the need for regulatory submission. So basically, if you know me, I do a lot of work on building permitting. It's basically all what I do in research. And this is like a mini piece of it. It's basically on if just to decide if we actually need a submission or not. You may wonder why there is such a topic in the Future Roads program, or in the Future Roads session. I used to be a fellow here in the Future Roads program, and my work was connecting the road digital twin data with the data that we might need for building permits, and this work is kind of a little excerpt of it. So Nick and I, we worked during my time here on a bigger process model, on basically a decision model that we need for the building permit stages. And we basically identified 4 main stages or decisions. And like the first one would be, is a decision, a submission actually needed? The second one is the submission valid, like the completeness check we just talked about. Then is the submission compliant, and can the submission be approved? And today I only focus on the very first one, but just to give you some context. So the first decision point is a submission required, and we would need to be decided if there's any major drain on potential applicant or inspector resources that actually needs to be given to this process, because sometimes it's really unclear and we're very implicit. And of course, it would cost a lot of resources if you would submit something that actually doesn't need an application. And the building permit authorities are understaffed, deal with a lot of workload. So I think that it's a valid point to investigate in like a small conference paper. So the research objective was basically to make this early stage decision more logical and explicit, reviewable and operable. And the research questions are, how can the implicit decision logic in regulatory guidance be formalized into determine whether substantive compliance with building regulations is required? Basically, do we need a submission? And also how this can be formalized to be operationalized to support the early determination of whether this early submission is required in a more transparent, accurate, and legally robust manner. We followed a science research guideline according to Takeda. So basically, the practice problem is the burdensome building permit process, and there's no, we want to have our submission or the question, the decision more explicit and reviewable and operable. I just showed you the research questions. So for the process, we explicate the problem, define the requirements, design and artifacts, tested also with some guideline, I'm going to show you in a minute, and also validated with some UK-based legislations and regulations. So basically, there are actually 2 decisions that need to be made, at least in the UK, where this is based on. So we basically use the UK manual to the building technical regulations. There are also other regulations, but we based on this. And as you see, Q1 from the previous process or decision model is the submission required, yes or no? But it would also go further into, is a substantive compliance required? So maybe it could be also the case that a submission is required, but maybe the checking is not required, but only the submission or the application will be archived. So there are different scenarios around this. And also, do really need is the procedure, the compliance check is actually need to be done. In our example, we just randomly chosen, not a road case, but there are also other like highway acts that could actually also be used. But the question was basically, does a showroom in a railway station need to comply? And this is the excerpt from the technical manual for the statutory undertakers and airport operators. So, and it basically, can you see that? No. A little bit. Oh, okay. So basically, it says statutory undertakers are bodies that have been given statutory powers and so on. They're usually utilities, telecom companies, and so on and so forth. But it needs to be checked. Others are not regarded as statutory undertakers, so there's a lot of exceptions and a lot of meaning into that. And the second, like the A9 paragraph, basically says a building belongs to such a statutory undertaker, like the Civil Aviation Authority or an airport operator are exceptions from that, and then there are like a few others. I don't want to read it all. But basically then it shows something about the office or a showroom that actually don't need to, so basically any building owned by a statutory undertaker is not used as either of the following, a house or a hotel, or an office or a showroom, unless it is part of a railway station or an airport. So this is quite complicated and a lot of meaning in a small piece of text. And if you know Nick Niesbet, so he invented the RASE markup language that we used here to operational and expose the logical structure and the semantic matrix into this A8 and A9 paragraphs. So you can see based on the RASE markup language, so the requirements are in blue, the application is green, the selections are purple, and exceptions are in yellow. And then we also, so it gets already a little bit more structure and logic, and we also turned it into some sheets that can be like a kind of an interactive form, so that we can actually already choose the ones that are, let's say, for example, the selections, like the utilities. So can we say, yes, that is a utility provider or not, so that it can be applied into that. So for our example, getting back to that and to save a little time, as we started a little late, so do the building regulations apply? So we can also have this interactive form here. And as you can see, we put it into this sheet, and it basically does needs to comply, sorry. And yeah, and we can have those drop-off lists of all options, and can ask the questions, but also doesn't need to be answered at all. Not all needs to be answered, better said. All right, so this was our little approach to understand and to formalize this question and the decision if a submission is actually required or not. So we turned this implicit legal reasoning from this manual text into externalized legal meaning without changing it or without turning it into machine-readable code. So we improved the transparency and traceability through this markup language, so we all know at all time what we have decided. And we actually asked some UK government bodies to validate it, but we are still waiting for the answers, unfortunately, so that will be a future work then. And for the research question, so we formalized this implicit decision. I think I mentioned that already, and we used the RASE markup language to do that. And I think that's basically it. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.